Now friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. I'm on the road right now, as you can see, so I can't really be in the office to record. In case you guys are wondering what I do when I'm not making YouTube videos about keeping humanity strong and strip mining alien planets, check out my personal vlog or my Instagram. Today we'll be continuing our Star Wars faction series by looking at the John Goodman of alien species. As usual, we'll be breaking down the strengths and weaknesses of each group's biology, culture, and technology. Biologically speaking, Hutts are one of the most evolved and adaptable species in the entire galaxy, which evidently means nature's idea of advanced evolution is a giant talking and slithering pile of sentient turds. The Hutts were an extremely strong species. A slap from their muscular tail could easily crush the bones of an average human. They also had extremely durable and thick leathery skin that offered good protection from all types of weapons. And that's all we know from a canon point of view. As usual, Legends has a lot more information about the species. Now, most people think that the Hutts hailed from the world of now Hutt, but it actually was their adopted homeland. They originally hailed from the world of Varl. Records about the world are spotty, but Hutts claim it was originally a lush forest paradise world. It's also believed that Varl was home to many large, dangerous predators, which is why the Hutts evolved into the terrifying bags of excrement that they are. It also doesn't hurt that they are an extremely toxic and poisonous species to consume. And even if you do end up eating them and surviving, well, they don't taste that good. They are also relatively fast for a creature that slithered around like a giant slug. Although classified as a gastropod, the Hutts shared many character traits as other different animal species. Like serpents, they had huge mouths that stretched from one side of their face to another, allowing them to consume entire humans in one mouthful if necessary. Like a mollusk, they didn't have teeth. Instead, their throats were aligned with a radula-like structure that shredded food. Their eyes were feline-shaped and protected by thick membranes. They can see in the ultraviolet spectrum and oftentimes lit their palaces with UV lights. This made Hutt residences appear dark to the human eye. It also gave potential assassins who couldn't see UV lights a false sense of security when they were trying to infiltrate a Hutt residence. Like sea mammals, Hutts had nostrils which could be sealed, and they also had a huge lung capacity which allowed them to stay submerged for hours at a time. Like worms, the Hutts were hermaphroditic and could change sex from male and female and reproduce just by themselves. This meant a Hutt could identify as several different genders throughout their entire lifespan. Generally speaking, when they're running their business, they identified as males, and when they began the childbearing process, they identified as females. When a Hutt baby was born, the parent would carry and nourish them within a brood pouch similar to marsupials. The Hutts as a species had an extremely low birth rate, which also might explain why they evolved so many survival mechanics. For one, their skin is incredibly tough and coated with a thick mucus layer. This not only served as a lubricant, which allowed them to move quickly over ground, it also made them incredibly hard to get a hold of, which makes it tougher for potential predators and those annoying MMA fighters who always go to the ground to catch them. The skin and mucus layer on Hutts also protected them from different types of toxins and corrosive chemicals. But should you manage to pierce their outer layer beneath the skin level, the Hutts have heavy rolls of fat and muscle which serve as additional protection. And should you make it through that layer, Hutts actually have redundant organs, including hearts, lungs, and in one case, even brains. One Hutt known as Gargan had a portion of his brain bit off by a giant worm. He survived and was expected to make a full recovery and regrow his brain in about a year. The Hutts were also generally resistant to all types of bacteria and viruses. On top of that, they had extremely long lifespans and continued to grow and collect knowledge throughout their entire life. It wasn't uncommon for a Hutt to reach 1,000 years in age. So as you can see, the Hutts were an incredibly formidable race and incredibly tough to kill. Now, according to canon, the Hutts came from the world of now Hutt, which was extremely hot and humid. This meant they were adapted to more humid environments and didn't necessarily enjoy arid climates. Although there are exceptions like Jabba the Hutt, who was based on Tatooine, and Nima the Hutt, who was based on Jakku. Because Hutts continuously grew for their entire life, that meant some older Hutts grew to enormous size and lost their ability to move without assistance from a motorized chair or repulsor. Because these larger Hutts couldn't even move, they depended on thugs and guards to protect them from potential dangers. Hutts in general were quite slow, so definitely focus on using powerful range weapons with a large heat sink or energy pack. You should be careful with younger Hutts though, they were surprisingly fast for gigantic slugs. Hutts also had a heavy sexual appetite. For some reason, they were one of the few non-biped and non-humanoid aliens to be really attracted to humanoids. Not really sure what exactly a Hutt gets from a human or a twi'lek. And you know what? For the first time in Star Wars lore, I really don't want to know. Jabba the Hutt was basically Hugh Hefner but with more skin and less bones. And like Hugh Hefner, ladies were his only weakness. Hutts were also extremely paranoid and would never let anyone else get close to them, except for a seemingly harmless, scantily clad Princess Leia, that is. And the fact that Leia was able to kill Jabba was a pretty big deal. Killing a Hutt as big and important as Jabba was hard for even the most seasoned bounty hunter. That's why after the war, Leia would be known in some circles not as a princess or senator or even rebellion hero, but as Leia, the slave girl Hutt Slayer. So unless you're a really attractive humanoid, I wouldn't risk getting close to a Hutt. Stay at range. And if you're not sure if you're attractive or not, trying to find out for the first time from a Hutt is a terrible idea because they'll just eat you if they find you disagreeable. Now, the best time to go after a Hutt is during the infancy stage. I know it's messed up, but considering the monsters that they will eventually turn into, you might just be doing a service for the rest of the galaxy. Baby Hutts are extremely vulnerable, completely blind, weighing just under 100 grams. They lived inside the brood pouch of their parents for around 50 years. When they emerged, they were a meter long and had the intellect of a 10-year-old human child. They weren't really considered full adults until they were 200 years old. It also should be noted when Hutts were childbearing, their killer-like gangster mentality usually softened. For some, that meant their business suffered and went into decline. This also made them more vulnerable to attack, but should you go after their child? Well, the wrath of a protective Hutt mother is a terrifying thing. But perhaps the greatest obstacle and enemy to a Hutt was stairs. They couldn't do stairs. Hutt society put an emphasis on survival above all else. The species could be incredibly cunning in their pursuit of self-preservation. Combined with an extremely long lifespan and several physical traits which makes them able to survive a plethora of external threats, it wasn't a matter of if a Hutt could rise to power, but when. And because they were generally a ruthless species, they oftentimes found themselves at the head of criminal organizations and other not-so-legitimate enterprises. As a species, the Hutts lacked any kind of moral compass. This meant that they would go to great lengths to destroy their enemies, and almost always used underlings to carry out these deeds, whether it be an assassin or a bounty hunter. They didn't usually like getting their hands dirty. At various times in Hutt history, large crime families would establish higher councils, which would settle disputes amongst different Hutt clans. The punishment for violence or movements against another Hutt clan was very heavy and usually included sanctions. While it was highly frowned upon by Hutt society, murders did happen between Hutts all the time. Although proving who was behind it was a whole nother issue. Baby Hutts were vulnerable and often targeted by Hutts in the same clan, fearing the loss of their own power. Now, it's usually very hard for an outsider to get to a Hutt. Because of their evolutionary path and lifestyle choices, Hutts were extremely paranoid individuals and usually surrounded by many layers of thugs and guards. Hutts also were generally good at cozying up with the powers of the galaxy, whether that be a local Imperial Moff or the Commercial Guild. This also gave them an extra layer of protection. So short of a small private army, the best way to go after a Hutt was covertly or under disguise. While Hutts employed large amounts of enforcers, they usually were made up of less intelligent species like Gamorreans. When you live the lifestyle that the Hutts do, you're bound to make a lot of enemies. Hutts ruled by fear, and when they were made vulnerable or wounded, oftentimes this attracted the worst of their enemies. So should you decide to target a Hutt, always make sure to find out who those enemies are and contact them. Better yet, find another Hutt that might have issues with the one you're going after, because they can be a great help. Although they won't officially support you, and should you get caught or fail, they'll be the first ones to condemn you in order to erase any connection to you. Hutts weren't known for being scientists or innovators. Their cunning lay in exploiting the market, workforces, and legal systems for maximum illicit gain. Therefore, they focused on activities like smuggling, drug trade, and spice mining. This meant that the Hutts rarely got involved in the development or manufacturing of technology. Simply put, the initial investment was way too high and the potential profit margin was way too low. And you couldn't really order a hit on a rival company like you could against, let's say, a rival spice dealer. The Hutts therefore relied on a variety of companies to supply them with weapons and vehicles. Hutt fleets were relatively ragtag and crewed by smugglers and pirates. These fleets were designed for speed and invasion rather than going up against conventional forces. But it should be said that in Legends, the Hutt fleets have been known to go up against larger, more established navies like the ones from the Empire or the Yuzhangbang. It's really hard to say what kind of strengths the Hutts have when it comes to technology. But the richer the Hutt was, the more access they had to black market weapons and aftermarket parts. Although Hutts were generally known for being really cheap when it came to protecting their employees, they oftentimes ran a state-of-the-art smuggling fleet in order to protect whatever goods they were trying to run. This meant that the Hutts usually had access to some of the best civilian ships in the entire galaxy. The Hutt's flaccid-looking feces-filled sack bodies were the winner of some terrible evolutionary jackpot. Their extremely long lifespan made them much smarter and durable than they actually looked. The clan-like nature of the Hutt society meant that a Hutt's wealth was gathered through many lifetimes, making the species of essentially criminal lords extremely dangerous and powerful. And like all dangerous and powerful things, the wisest option is to confront them from orbit, with a few dozen banks of turbo lasers. Well guys, that is our faction analysis of the Hutt. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you want to see next. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.